Chris, welcome to the podcast, man.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Sathiya. Happy to be here.
Man, I mentioned I've been following your work for a long time. I'm a big fan of what you do. You're in the space of really protecting kids, and this is a very relevant conversation for our show. Where we talk a lot about sexual misbehavior and porn addiction. Maybe as a starting point, why should we care about protecting and defending young minds?
Well, because there has nothing in human history has, been placed into the pockets of our young people like what we've given them with 100 million choices and 100 million people and not a lot of guidance as to how to handle these things, right? And all the things we love about children, their curiosity, right? Their risk taking at times, the way they explore and just jump into things, right? These are wonderful attributes of our kids. And I've got four of my own. I have three teenage boys who are ages 13, 14, and 14. And then I have a daughter who's a sophomore in college. So I'm right in the thick of this, right? With a lot of the dads and, some of the moms that are out there listening. Right. And we love these attributes of our kids, this sort of unbridled energy that you just want to put in a can like Red Bull and take yourself, right? And just use. And yet these are the very things that can so easily be weaponized because we have put so many choices in their pockets and we have done it in a way that they're not ready for some of, the technologies that we have put in them that are designed to draw them in, right? That are beyond anything that we've ever experienced. So we've got to jump into these things. We've always had risks in childhood, but nothing like we have today. And so we must do more to prepare them.
Maybe I'll play devil's advocate to my own question here, because I think you're making a really good point. Like technology has really created an entire different world that we weren't prepared for. I can tell you, my parents were not prepared for it and how to lead us through it when, I was maybe 11 when we got our first personal computer. And well, actually I was younger than that, but it was kind of the advent of it and then smartphones and all that. So on the flip side, why aren't we why does your work need to exist? Why do you need to be such an advocate? Because kids can't smoke, kids can't drink. There's so much law to protect kids from harm. And yet on the technological side, certainly on the side of even pornography, I mean, when I was a kid, I could just check the box and say, yes, I'm 18 years old. And you can still kind of do that today. It's changing a little bit in the States now, and we'll get into that. But why is this even necessary? Why are we not being more protective of young people on the technology side?
Because we were sold a lie. Think about the way that we talk about technology. Everything that we talk about related to technology is an advance. It's an improvement. And whenever we think about it, we always think that it's an advance or an improvement. And in Sathiya, we've been sold a lie. We have a billion-dollar marketing engine that has sold us a false set of goods that has not delivered on its promises. And I think we've got it all backwards, right? We keep waiting. I think parents are doing this too. They're waiting for laws or they're waiting for undisputable evidence that this is bad for our kids. And then we'll take it away because then I don't have to be the bad guy. I can say, look, right? It's that thing. And I think we've got it all backwards because it's our kids. I think we need to be waiting for beyond a reasonable doubt evidence that it's helpful before we give it to them. We've got it all backwards. Right. And so we're experimenting on them. This is what we're doing. We're waiting for someone to prove. And here's the thing. Not every child of every parent who's listening to this is going to suffer some egregious harm like sextortion or be kidnapped by someone that they meet, some predator. Right. And I think those are the things that we go, oh, that won't be my kid. OK, I get that. And I'll concede that might not be true. But I would argue, Sathiya, that every child, and I'll die on this hill as a former middle school youth pastor, that every middle schooler who spends time in social media is a diminished version of themselves.
Wow.
A slightly less energetic, a slightly less relational, a slightly less spiritual, a slightly less excellent version of themselves. Because these technologies, by their very design, are extraction tools, right? They are devices that only thrive in their model by taking out of us, extracting from us time and attention and focus and all of these things. That's the only way they make money. And at the bottom line, that's exactly what they're trying to do. So I want us to, and I think that's what makes it complicated, why we can justify giving our kids our technology because, well, okay, they aren't addicted to porn and they're not being sextorted, but it's paper cuts, it's unremarkable diminishes in the lives of our children. Slightly more tension, slightly less focus, slightly less excellent versions of them that I think are going mostly unnoticed in a lot of children today.
Yeah, I'll back you up on that. And my kids are not maybe in that age group that you're talking about. I have one kid and he's 14 months old. And
Yeah.
we have had so many conversations, my wife and I, about how we're going to manage screen time and exposure and, cell phones and all that kind of stuff. And that's why we love your page and a couple of the other people out there like Jonathan Haidt and some of those guys that are really pioneering some great information about how to protect, young ones. But we, my wife and I are both worship leaders, worship people. So we like having worship on in the morning. And we noticed that our son, Judah, he loves the songs. He's got a couple favorites that he always asks for every morning. And he claps when, the congregation claps, like he knows how to follow along. So we were loving it. And then there was one day that he was kind of like griping about like us turning the TV on. Just the way he asked for it seemed strange. And so we're like, oh, whatever, we turn it on. And then he kind of did it again the next day. And we just thought, no, there's something, like he was kind of like a little bit dependent. And we said no. And he threw a fit. And we were like, whoa. We thought we thought this was like relatively innocent. It's just worship music and whatever. But already at 14 months old, he's kind of got this like screen dependence. And the next 2-3 days, like he was adamant, like asking for it. And we were just, we've learned to like, he's so young that we can't say no and he gets it. So we were just finding other things for him to do. And now he's not really asking for it. But even if we were to play that song on our phones, he'll ask for it again. He wants the screen. Like there's like this hook. And It's been really eye-opening for us just how quickly this can start, but the mood changed. That was the thing that I was the most shocked by. Like it was affecting his demeanor and his mood. And the kid's only 14 months old. So a very good wake up call for us just to realize, like we were already talking about it, but we need to take it seriously. And I think you're saying this is happening to an even greater extent because that's just with, a kid with a screen, but then you throw in social media and notifications and, buzzes and reminders and all the stuff that can kind of keep us in it. And I have to imagine just, the young brains are just they're not ready for it.
That's right. There's this developmental window that we have right now that I think we need to be careful of, right? And I shared my background as I used to work in middle school ministry. And that's really the whole reason for Protect Young Eyes. I didn't expect to be doing this. I'm supposed to be a partner at Ernst & Young right now. That was the path that I'm supposed to be on. I have a degree in accounting. I went into consulting and finance for, over a decade until the Lord called me into middle school ministry, which is a total 180. But it was the time frame, Sathiya, that I did that from 2009 to 2016, where I watched us put portable internet in the pockets of our kids. And that unsettled me, right? As a man who had struggled with compulsive use of pornography for years, that had, I had put that in the rear view, and then I watched us put that monster in their pocket, and that unsettled me. And so I started Protect Young Eyes out of that. But the reason I share that is because, let's agree on something here. I know your kids aren't there yet. Mine are, but middle school has enough drama. It doesn't need help, right? Adolescence and puberty and growing up in a relationship, it has enough chaos and confusion and noise, and we don't need to add to it. At a time when there should be fewer voices answering some of life's most significant questions about where do I belong, we all go through this sort of arc of development in the development of ourself. A lot of people, listening to this, you may not love all things about Disney, and I don't either. But the most recent Inside Out 2, does a fabulous job of exploring this idea of identity and what do I believe? Like, what are my core beliefs? And you see Riley wrestling with this thought that I'm a good person up against things that are drawing her in a different direction, right? And this is the development of self and worth and asking big questions. And all young people go through this, right? It starts young, just in their bodies, and it turns into their emotions and then their language and then identity formation. This should be the phase when fewer people, and those should be people who love them, are answering these questions. And this is exactly the time when we drop 10,000 different voices into their lives. We actually call them influencers. Think about what that word means for a minute, right? And we allow these people who don't care about our children to answer questions during a time when they are uniquely vulnerable to suggestion, uniquely vulnerable to influence, and are craving the answer to the question of where do I belong and am I loved? And they're getting it from people who don't care where they belong, who don't care if they're loved or not. So of course they're confused. Of course they're anxious. Of course they're a slightly diminished version of themselves, because with 10,000 mirrors and 10,000 choices, you would be anxious too, right? And we feel it even as adults who supposedly have a fully formed prefrontal cortex who can put the brakes on some of these, more irrational emotional thoughts better than they can. Yet we still struggle. And so I want us to sort of step back and ask these bigger questions around what is best for our kiddos.
Yeah. So let's talk about prototypes. Like my mind always thinks in ideals. If you had your kids all over again today with what you know now, how would you handle their use of technology and social media from, the age of 0 all the way up to, let's call it 18, 19, where they start to become more independent?
What's interesting is the message from us hasn't changed that much. And I still say a lot of the same things in 2024 that I was saying back in 2016. We just now have the science to prove what anecdotally felt as a father and as a leader of junior high kids, what anecdotally felt like things that we weren't doing right. And we now have evidence to prove it, right? So forever, we've been using the hashtag, and I'm sure you've seen us use it out on social media, delay is the way, right? In other words, there's no such thing as a child who has too little access to screen time. No matter what the marketing tells you, right? We want to believe the marketing sometimes that our child won't be ready for a digital world, won't get into a good college, won't have a good job someday if we don't expose them to some of these things. And all of that is a lie. They will figure it out. They will be fine, right? So there's no such thing as too little. Also, we have to remember that even if we say no, we have to teach them about technology as if we've said yes, because we don't control all the digital doorways. So we have to have age appropriate preparing, not just protecting and bubble wrapping, but preparing conversations. Right. So this idea of delay, this idea of very relational, intentional conversations about all of the horrible things that we hope never happen to our kiddos, these are what inform the things that we say to parents. And so I would do many of the same things that we have been practicing. My poor kids, you never want to be the teenager who grows up in a house with a dad who runs an internet safety organization. That just stinks. You're a kid.
They're patient zero, right?
Oh, yeah, they are. They're the ones who are victims of all of my ideas and the things that, we're discovering and trying. And I tell parents that in my talks all the time. I'm not going to recommend something unless I've tried it on my own guinea pig children at least a couple of times. So, those are just some principles, and we've boiled that into, I'm a framework guy. It's that kind of consultant side of me. I need frameworks and spreadsheets and pictures. And you've seen us share these, and I invite folks to go check out some of these things in our different social media feeds. Here I'm talking about social media, and I'm trying to use it for good as much as possible, right?
Yeah, I get you. Same thing over here. Yep, 100%.
Right, same thing for you, right? And so these 5 habits that we look for in families, and we talk about the 5 layers of protection with a pyramid and what that looks like. And those are the sort of practical ways that I think we can take something that seems big and scary and very subjective like the internet, and protecting our kids from this big scary thing and kind of breaking it down into some real practical ideas. That's where we really like to specialize. So
I love the delay is the way. I have seen that come up in your content quite a bit. And I'm curious if because you mentioned there's sort of a duality. So delay is the way, and then you also have to have these preparatory conversations. So it can't just be you never watch technology and then all of a sudden you're an adult and you can have a free for all. Like we all know that's a disaster. So is there such a thing as overdoing the delay part? We've had John Deloney on the podcast, and he has gone like very back and forth. And I don't know if you follow him or know his stance, but
I do. Yeah.
Yeah. So he drew a really hard line basically of like no phones. And when his kids have friends over, they'll put all their phones in a bowl and they have a great time. And Again, he's figuring out what works for him. That's obviously like he's really pulling on the delay thing. And I'm sure, knowing John, I'm sure he's having conversations and whatever else. But is there a nice sweet spot age wise, or are you looking for indicators of maturity to have those preparatory conversations so that you're not over shielding the kids?
Definitely. And this is where parents, you know your kids better than I do, right? So what we say in our parent presentations is we want to wait for social media specifically, and that includes YouTube. YouTube is social media, right? We
Good
want to be
point.
really careful. I want to be careful with that. And so we don't just give second graders YouTube because it's just videos. I want us to also be very careful with it. But when I say that, I'm traditionally talking about TikTok, Snapchat, Instagram. Those are the big three. If you're international listening to this, WhatsApp is another one. I always think it's funny.
True.
Everybody on earth outside of Americans use WhatsApp, and
Yeah.
people in America just don't even realize that, but that's the largest app on earth in terms of usage.
Oh, crazy.
Yeah. And so I want us to wait until we get to kind of that 16 plus range, right? That's really what we're looking for when it comes to those sort of algorithmic feed recommendation engine places. And that's what those are. I want us to get totally clear of junior high before we're giving them anything smart. Right.
Okay.
So
maybe they have
device,
like a Wise phone or something like that before for communication
like
purposes.
That.
Yeah.
A Bark phone or a Gab phone, something that was designed for kids with minimal notification driven kind of interactions. They have very specific tool driven purposes, right? Not traps. So I look at technology can either be a tool or a trap. The design of technology and social media is designed to be a trap, a neurological trap. But if it's a tool where I need to communicate with you, I need to see that my son has ridden his bike up to the speedway to get a slushie so I can tell him to grab me a Mountain Dew or something, right? Like that, it's that kind of stuff that is a tool that is a different mindset. And so I want us to steer clear of as many of those developmentally fragile and fabulous phases as possible from some of these technologies. And I always put a caveat on that when parents press me on an age when it comes to social media, right? I'll say 16, but for some kids, that's still too soon. You need to know your child. You need to know the way that they've been created and their unique vulnerabilities and craft that decision based on them. One of the things that I say, which I think sometimes snaps parents' attention, is we are not responsible for our children's current happiness. We are responsible for their future wellness. The goal is not to have happy children. If we shape our children with decisions that are aimed at making them happy, they will soon discover as an adult that not all decisions are happiness decisions. Yeah. And if we're always chasing that, then we're going to live a very difficult life full of disappointment. And I think we make a lot of digital decisions based on current happiness around, well, my kid feels like they're the only one who doesn't have this or that, or giving my kid that device does calm them down. Well, of course it does. It's a dopamine engine. Dopamine always wins. We have brains that crave that stimulus for different reasons. And so I want us to be careful that we don't make a lot of short-term, my kid is happy decisions with technology. Instead, have an eye on their wholeness, or from a faith perspective, their holiness, and make sure that we have decisions that are lined up with those ideas instead.
Yeah, that's really good. Because that was the first thing that went into my head is like, well, I know a parent's going to push back and say, but this is going to upset my kid, or he's going to be the only kid without a smartphone in his class, or, all that kind of stuff, which I'm sure you get a lot. What is it about 16? Because I think Jonathan Haidt's research as well, again, this is like a great example of data suggesting something that you've been purporting for a long time. But I believe his data came out and said 16 would also be the age where they could handle social media typically. Again, there's some nuance like you were suggesting, but what is it about that age that suddenly makes them more tolerable for social media?
Well, I'll point to some non-scientific things just based on decades of working with young people, right? So number one, I want to stay clear of junior high. Whatever, at all costs, I want us to steer clear of dropping kids in junior high, right? So that gets us well clear. I also want kids to get past certain important transitions. There was a study that was done in the UK, I believe it was, and it pointed toward 2 developmental transition times that create relational and mental health vulnerabilities for children. And that's when adolescence sort of sets in, and it's also when they're transitioning from secondary school to college. And those are times when a stress goes up, right, in the life of a young person. So you're going to be looking to social media and other places to how others are handling what their life looks like. And you're often then seeing that you don't measure up and you feel worse about yourself. And so they pointed toward those being 2 developmentally fragile times that we want to be careful with what kinds of outside messages those young people are being exposed to during those times to make sure that they're pointing them in the right direction. All that to say, I want to get as far clear of the middle school to high school transition and also get into puberty in a way where they have developed relational templates and other templates for how they interact with the world that are not strictly based on screens. Right? They're not strictly based on having conversations via text message. And they realize because they've been trained to look someone in the eye and have a conversation and work things out with another human being, because that's the way the world works. Right. Yeah. And so I want to developmentally press as far as I can into adolescence so that there are other anchors set relationally, spiritually, emotionally, physiologically before digital anchors set that cause some of those versions of themselves to be, again, diminished quite as good as they could have been. So those are unscientific sort of reasons. Just when I look at the way that adolescent development takes place, when I look at the way that kids mature and how they interact with each other, those are some of the things that drive me pointing toward that as an approximate time that maybe they're ready.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. Where I live, you cannot operate a motorized vehicle on your own until you're 16. There's a couple of things that happen when you're 16 that I feel like we just know there's a different degree of maturity that comes. And I think the way you explain some of those transitions makes sense. We're talking about the individual smartphone, having a device that's yours. And so I know, like I said, my wife and I have also agreed, like, we're not going to do iPad parenting. We're just not fans of it. It doesn't make sense to us. And I imagine that'd be in a similar category. What about the family TV? Anything there that you would suggest as a best practice? And has that changed from when you were growing up? For me, I used to love watching hockey Saturday nights with my dad. That was I love that. Cartoon Saturday mornings. We did watch a little bit rebelliously after school. Sometimes we told our mom we were doing homework, but we were watching TV. But the access was very different. It was, and the experience was different. Is it like that now, though, or has that part even changed?
No, I think that's fine. I'm not, a dictator when it comes to these kinds of things, right? And I want people to hear me very closely, clearly that I am pro technology. I'm just all about right tech, right kid, right time. And there's something different about a smart TV, although I want us to have that smart TV under control because it is really just a big smartphone hanging on the wall these days in terms of its access, and it sometimes has browsers and you can still watch YouTube and those kinds of things. But in terms of like sitting on a couch and watching that, to me, that's a radically different experience than the individualized one-on-one experience with my head down, ignoring the rest of the world 12 inches away from an iPad. That's totally different to me than being on a couch watching a smart TV where my head is even kind of up. My posture is different. I'm more aware of people around me, and I'm even relationally maybe interacting with them while that is going on. I think that's a good point. That's different. And so I'm not that draconian, in those kinds of ways. We have multiple smart TVs in the McKenna house. But here's the thing. As a parent, again, I want, whenever there's a media experience going on, I want it as often as possible to be a we activity and not a me activity. So when your son or daughter is sitting down on the couch watching that show on TV, you simply kind of sit down next to them. It's that shoulder to shoulder kind of being with them. And if nothing else, even if you really don't like what they're watching because it's not anything you're interested in, that's okay. I want us to be curious about the things that they're consuming on all the media, whether it's Netflix or whether it's their Chromebook, whatever it is. I want us to be curious and aware of those things so that we can ask curious questions later. Hey, did you like that show that you watched? And You just need to show them that you're slightly interested. That's, to me, the more important part of those kinds of experiences, is being shoulder to shoulder, experiencing it with them. Again, we instead of just me. And that's the thing. Smartphones and tablets turn a media experience into a very selfish me kind of thing, right? And I want us to get with them and be alongside them and watch videos and whatever they're into with them, so that we can relationally connect later with those things.
How important is it to set an example with phones? And like you're talking about the individual part, and I'm even thinking of conversations my wife and I have had to have with each other, where it's like, hey, hello, like I'm trying to spend time with you and you're just on your phone. Like this happens at an adult level also. And I guess I'm just thinking in our context, when it comes to quitting pornography, that's often something we say for fathers who are like, hey, I don't want my kids to fall into this. And we say, well, actually the best thing you can do is quit for yourself, set the example, and pave the way, in that regard. And I have to imagine here, like adults, we're pretty reliable on our phones just for day-to-day life and work. But is there something that we can pattern and set as an example as well, so that our kids just don't feel like they're being left out or ignored, or dad gets a phone but I don't? I don't know. Is there a way you can mitigate that dynamic a little bit?
The fact that we have devices, to me, is something we can very easily explain. I mean, there are things that adults have that kids don't. There are things that adults can do that kids can't. Why? Because that's a part of being a child versus an adult. Everything in the world is based on that. Our legal system is based on that, right? That's just the way the world is. But as a parent, my gosh, do we need to be a lot more aware of how we use our technology. I know that we need it for work. I know that even when it comes to our kids, we're often using it to check on their grades or check in with their coaches or know what their schedule is or when the conferences are, all those kinds of things. But we must keep it in place. In fact, I just wrote a post out on Substack called "Busy People Don't Have Epiphanies." And the subtitle is "Parents, Put Your Phone Down and Kick a Rock because you might be a genius." And what I mean by that is I love the way that they depict Einstein in the movie Oppenheimer, right? If you remember that scene where he's approaching Einstein and Einstein is standing by a pond and he's simply throwing rocks, arguably the most intelligent man on earth, and he finds peace and solace just tossing rocks. And there's a lot of stories about Einstein, that he was a man who loved to sail. He was horrible at it, but he enjoyed doing it. And he would aimlessly sail. And there are stories about how that transformed his way of seeing the universe as he contemplated the curvature of the earth and changed science because he was bored thought. And we're even reminded of that right in a recent sermon that I heard about how Mary pondered the things that were happening to her as we're leading up to Christmas here, right? When you look at that Hebrew word, that's not, I'm actively going and doing a search. This isn't Wikipedia. This isn't Google. It is ruminating, contemplating, and meditating. And it's in the power of those moments that we often discover ideas. It's why, Sathiya, I don't run with headphones. I don't run with my phone at all. I have a Garmin that tracks how far I go sort of offline and connects to GPS, and I connect it to Bluetooth with my phone when I get back. Not only am I being more careful because people are very distracted when they drive these days, and I'm trying to stay safe on the roads, but there are things that I think about, ideas that come to me when I'm peacefully running out in the country. And so as parents, it's good for us. And it's good for them to see us. And it's just little things, especially as, timing wise, people will be listening to this, but right now we're heading into the holidays. Anytime that our kids are home a little bit more, that could be over summer vacation, whatever it is. I want us to be modeling the right behaviors. In fact, that's the first of our 5 habits of a tech-ready home, is to model the right behaviors. And it doesn't have to be big things, dads and moms. It's what I call micro moves. And these are some that I just wrote about. No digital devices in the bathroom. Ditch whatever phone holders you have in your car, especially if you're the kid's chauffeur. If you're just going to get gas, don't take your phone. You don't need to pick up your phone at stoplights. While you're going to the store to get that gallon of milk, talk to the kid who's ringing you through the checkout line, right? If you travel, try traveling without AirPods. Who knows that the genius might be sitting next to you and you might have a conversation. No phones in bedrooms. Be aware of how often you're taking photos of your child, because neurologically, you will actually remember more about that moment if you just look at them.
Wow.
Right? So I think it's all of these micro moves that as parents, You don't realize how distracted you are as a parent until you actually think about squaring up and giving your child your full attention. And then you realize how infrequently you actually do that.
No, it's so good. I'm sorry to cut you off. I was just, you reminded me of a story of someone who they went to the park with their kids, and typically they would just, they walk them to the playground and then they just sit at the bench and they're on their phone. And he said the one day he just decided to leave his phone behind, and he was shocked at how frequently his kids would look over their shoulder to see if dad was watching. Like he had no idea. And he was missing out on all these opportunities to provide that safety and that approval and that encouragement. Because his phone, he thought that was like a great chance for his kids to go play, and they're having fun and he's just doing his thing. And he didn't realize, oh, we're actually here together. Even if I am just sitting on the bench watching them, they need my attention.
Oh, that's amazing. That's so rich. Yeah.
It's a big deal. So you got me hooked now, man. This is the first layer, but I want the other four. So the first one's be a model. What are the other four for a tech-ready home?
That's right. And so it's model the right behaviors is number one. Number two is pursue authentic connection, because a full calendar doesn't mean a full connection with our children. Number three is we encourage work and play. Right? We need to, as Jonathan and I talks about, we need to encourage a play-based childhood, but we also have to show our kids the value of delayed gratification. That most of the most important things we're going to do are hard work, right? It's a job that earns vacation. Not everything is a vacation. Not everything, and this is the real tie to technology, Sathiya, is not everything is an 8-second dopamine loop. That idea of delayed gratification. So model the right behaviors, pursue authentic connection, encourage work and play. We delay addictive technologies. That's the delay is the way part. And then we diligently prevent harm. And then within diligently prevent harm, we have the 5 layers of protection. So we have the 5 habits, which is a framework. Then within the diligently prevent harm, we have 5 layers that we wrap around our kids that are relational, the home network, devices, the location where they use, and the apps that they're using. All those 5 layers can be leveraged to provide kind of that tactical hardware, software kind of protections that are necessary in the digital age. So there we go. A framework and a framework, but that's just the way my brain works to try to break this down into things that you can chew on kind of one piece at a time. And that's what we do in our 90-minute presentations that we do all over the world for parents at schools and churches, including in Canada. So
give me the 5 again. Just give me the list. There was one I wanted to ask you about, but I want to make sure I hear them all in their context.
Yeah, so we model the right behaviors, pursue authentic connection, encourage work and play, delay addictive technologies, and diligently prevent harm.
So with the work and play, you mentioned like a play-based childhood. And then the work part that's where you said like it's at some point you start to teach them about delaying gratification, that there's process, there's hard work, you don't get things right away. And do you have to kind of artificially create that? Is that naturally built in if you're following these principles? What does that look like?
That looks like giving your kid jobs to do, because here's the thing, as a parent, you will always do it better. And it will always be done more efficiently as the parent, right? And imagine if you're a mom or a dad and you walk into a room and it's a mess and you clean it up. When you're done, you pause and you enjoy the satisfaction of that job well done. And there is dopamine. There is this satisfaction that comes from seeing that you achieved something and it looks amazing. Have you ever experienced that?
100%,
right? It could be something that you've built, something that you've done outside, whatever it is. You've mowed the lawn and the lines are perfect. And you just stand there with your arms folded in the driveway and go, yes. Right? And so when we are the only ones doing that, we rob our children of that same experience. We need them to experience the satisfaction of a job well done. Are the lines going to be horribly crooked for most of the time that they mow the lawn? Absolutely. I am living through that right now with teenage sons who are mowing the lawn, but I have to let them. Yeah. One of my sons has Down syndrome. So I have twin sons who are fraternal. One has Downs, the other one does not, which is just a fascinating thing to parent. Yeah. And so I'm trying to allow my son who has Downs, his name is Grant, to do more things around the house. And recently I had him fill the dishwasher. And I wish I could show you the picture of his version of filling the dishwasher. We use it in our parent presentations because it is a hilarious mess of dishes that looks like they were just poured into the dishwasher. But he was so proud of getting that done. And I didn't correct it. I put in the soap, I closed it, and I let it run, and then just listen to everything go clank, 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 right? But here's the thing, dads and moms, if we redo what they've done, we undo their confidence. We've got to let them stumble through that and feel a little bit of getting it done themselves. And the next time we can scaffold and come alongside. And this is what teachers do in school, right? To teach our kids a little bit, show them a little bit more. You can show them where the plates actually go into the bottom rack of the dishwasher next time. Hey, buddy, why don't you put them in this way and show them that? Oh, yeah, that looks great. And then you step back and let them stumble and bumble through it a little bit more. And I just don't think we take that time because you know why? Even we want the 8-second dopamine hit. And so we just kind of get distracted and we move on to something, right? So I want us to feel the benefit of that on both sides and delegate, give our kids those jobs.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Talk to me about the environment piece. I'm kind of asking selfishly because it's something I think about a lot as well. And a general guideline we give our clients is like charge your phone in a different room because a lot of slip ups happen at night on the phone. And usually it's because you can't sleep or maybe you're in the habit of being on your phone to try to regulate yourself before you fall asleep. So it's like, dude, just charge your phone in a different room. You will literally stack the odds in your favor of having a good night's rest and not wandering and all that. But I have to imagine there's more to it. And you did kind of allude to it, but any other practicals for where people should be allowed and not allowed to be on their phones? And I don't know if there's TV placement, even that kind of stuff. Does that matter? What are some of your top tips there?
Well, so we have 5 places that we tell parents, and some of these will apply to us as adults too, because I understand. So one of the things that, when we talk about the location, right, there's the 4th layer in the 5 layers of protection, right? Where we use devices dictates how we use our devices. When it comes to parents and kids, we talk about bedrooms, bathrooms, buses, sleepovers, and grandma and grandpa's house. Those are the 5 places that typically increase the risk of digital harm. Not that I love grandparents and I love that my kids hang out with my grandma and grandpa, but grandmas and grandpas usually have different rules and different routines and they haven't thought about their router in forever. And so kids are online and we've given them a device to go to grandma and grandpa's house. And we just don't often think about the fact that that's a riskier spot because of those attributes. So those are the spots that we're careful of. School buses are a horrible, horrible place in the digital age. I can't tell you how many parents I've had tell me about their young child who was exposed to pornography by another child because they all have their devices. There's one adult who's not paying attention to the kids. They're driving the bus, which is what we want. Yeah. And that's the situation, right? So it's a bunch of unsupervised 5-year-olds through 15-year-olds hanging out together is essentially what a school bus is these days. So for us, right, when we talk about the bedroom, I talk about the toxic trio. The toxic trio is bedrooms, boredom, and darkness. Whenever those 3 things are present with something connected to the internet, as my friends in the Catholic Church would say, you put yourself in the near occasion of sin. You put yourself in the devil's crosshairs if you are consistently bored, in dark. And with kids, it's bedrooms. Maybe not so much for us, but for as adults, boredom and darkness are a huge problem for us as adults, especially men who have struggled with compulsive use of pornography. So you've got to have that bedtime cutoff time and you've got to stay out of dark places. But bedrooms, because kids' rooms are often sort of their domain, their kingdom, their safe space. As a youth pastor, whenever I had a kid who was struggling with whatever it was, their bedroom is almost always a spot where that behavior most often took place. That's their spot, right? That's where they close the door. That's sort of my place where I just go do my things. And so that's why we include bedrooms in there for kids. So I think there's things in there that I think apply whether you're 4, 14, or 40 when it comes to making sure that you don't tempt the temptation into your life by just putting yourself in a spot where you're more vulnerable.
So when it comes to defending young eyes, because we've talked about, we talked about the peer-to-peer experience that can happen on the bus. We're talking about grandma and grandpa, obviously a lot around parents. Is there a particular party that you would see these people, like if this group of people could really get on board, we could really see things change? Because we also haven't really talked about the education system a ton and, some of the legalities and stuff. I definitely want to get into that. But is there one demographic that you say, man, if these people would just get it, we could really see kids be protected, making better decisions, and not be prone to the adverse effects of technology.
There are things on earth that are called wicked problems. If you're listening to this and never heard that phrase, you could Google that phrase, wicked problem, right? So think of climate change. Climate change is a wicked problem. Why? Because it's almost impossible to solve without a ton of different layers and stakeholders and people coming together and resources to do something about it, right? So that's a phrase that's used, it's a wicked problem. Technology is a bit of a wicked problem because it is so woven into the fabric of our lives. It's tough to solve. It's tough to fix it because you fix one thing and there's a hole over here. It's difficult. There are bright lines between good and bad technology, right? YouTube helps me fix my dryer, but it also shows me people getting their heads chopped off in other countries. Like, so it's right. It's it's a tough thing to control. So I typically talk about society in 5 layers. You have the home layer. Then you also have places of worship. So the faith layer, you have the school layer, the policy layer. This is laws and government. And then the company layer, right? So companies, governments, schools, churches, and the family. First and foremost, families. We can't be waiting for any of the other layers to figure this out. Yeah. We can't wait for government to figure this out. Our Congress here in the U.S. can't get anything done. We've seen that over and over again. So families, you've got to first choose. Delay is the way. You have first got to choose for yourself how this is going to look and be firm and be resolute in the way that you want this to go, right? But all the other layers there, all 4 of them are not stewarding their responsibilities. So the church is doing an abysmal job of stewarding its responsibility to boldly and firmly tell its parents to quit giving their kids technology, to say that they are, that the holiness, the direction, the still quiet voice of the Holy Spirit is being stifled in the lives of children because parents are handing this stuff over. Stop it. And we need pastors bold enough to say that from the front, to quit giving kids this technology, right? Schools, K through 12, we need mandated, like globally, whether it's Canada or the US, we need mandated digital discernment curriculum. I would argue that when it comes to the thriving of our children as future citizens, that digital discernment is more important than math right now. When it comes to their long-term thriving in society, whether it's at a job, at home, in relationships, I believe that is totally missing from curriculum today, and it needs to be a part of it. Clearly, our policies aren't doing a job. I mean, at least here in the U.S., and honestly, the U.S. has to lead the way. Australia is kicking our behinds right now because of things that they're doing, right? They've passed this law now making it 16 is the age of kind of minimum for social media. Right. So we'd have a lot of discussion around the pros and cons of that and the way that went through. But here in the U.S., we are not stewarding what we have, which is the global headquarters. We're the ones that built this monster, right? We're the ones that unleashed this and opened Pandora's box to the world. And we are still following 26-year-old policies, right? We have something called CDA 230, which is the 26 words that built the internet and created this immunity shield around companies so you can't go after them. And we have COPPA, the Children's Online Privacy and Protection Act, which passed in 1998, which basically gave everybody free rein to treat 13 and above as a digital adult. And that's totally untrue. We know that. And we still live in the destructive wake of those decisions. And you know who made those decisions? That's Congress. And Congress has done nothing for 26 years, 28 in one case, to fix them. So that layer is totally disregarding its responsibilities. And we can solve this. We've solved this issue before. I used to work when I was in business at Ernst & Young. My job was to help companies not become the next Enron. So I would assess risk and mitigate risk, because what we did in the US in 2002 is we created personal liability for CEOs and CFOs who don't mitigate certain financial risks. And you know what happened? They all mitigated all their financial risks because nobody wanted to go to prison. So we lack the teeth in our policies. And obviously businesses, because of the model that they've built, the attention economy, they have a profit motive. There's no motivation for them to choose anything different. The incentives aren't there. So all layers are failing when it comes to preparing and protecting our children in digital spaces. But it has to start at home. It has to start in the family. We can't wait for the other ones. But
Yeah.
when I say a wicked problem, that's why. You can see how complex it is up and down those 5 different layers and how difficult it is to get all 5 rowing in the same direction. So
Oh, yeah.
as a dad or as a mom, you have to control what you can.
Yeah, it's funny. I feel like my response when I get asked about how things change around pornography is very similar. Like I really believe it starts in the home. I'd love to see the local church step up. Like I totally
Yes.
agree with kind of that hierarchy, the education system policy,
Yep.
and then the last was corporations. You said so. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Talk to me about the local church. What would you like to see? Because as soon as you said it, I was like, yeah, I've actually never heard. I don't think I've ever heard a sermon really or any kind of prompting from the pulpit about how parents, definitely how parents should be, raising their kids. We hear stuff about that, but rarely anything around technology, social media, certainly nothing very bold. What would you like to see, and what do you think the church should be doing in this area?
Well, ironically, Jonathan Haidt, who is a proposed atheist, I think has done a better job than the church in calling this out. Chapter 8 of The Anxious Generation is very clear on the spiritual degradation that's happening across all different, types of faiths that are out there when it comes to our kids. So, I'll read. I wrote a post which stirred the pot a little bit. It was titled, "Is it sinful to give your child social media?"
Mm,
And I dug into that question. I took a look at scripture and compared it to the decisions that we're making. And what I said, when it comes to the church is harming children for a different reason, for doing almost nothing. I've experienced a deafening silence from the pulpit and stage about the pervasive spiritual degradation occurring in the hearts and minds of God's children because of the early introduction of smartphones and social media into their lives. And so I just simply think we need to speak truth, right? We've seen, and I also talk about this in the post, is we, in children's wings at churches, we often see a picture of Jesus surrounded by the kids, right? Don't stop the children from coming to me, these verses from Matthew. But what we miss right after that are the verses where Jesus says, hey, if you harm a kid, tie a big rock around your neck and jump into the ocean.
right.
Right. And what we think about when we think about that verse is we think about predators, we think about people who sexually abuse kids, we think about all of those other people. And the question that I ask in this post is, what if Jesus is talking about us? Right? What if he's talking about us? A medium-sized rock would have been sufficient. But Jesus is making sure we're listening. Don't harm my children. And then later on, it's not just that. He makes the case, and the same could be said about pornography, to violently remove things from our lives, plucking out body parts, right, that cause us to stumble in our walk
That's
with
right.
God.
Yeah.
And so, I would challenge parents and pastors to say, is there anything on earth right now that is doing more to darken the holiness of our children than technology right now? Should we be teaching about anything else?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It wasn't the fire, it wasn't the earthquake, it wasn't the wind, it was the quiet voice that Elijah heard that transformed him. There are not a lot of kids who can hear the quiet voice of the Holy Spirit through the noise that we have put in their pockets. So I think we as parents need to ask some really, really tough questions. Questions like this: will social media or a smartphone cause my child to stumble? Will social media show my child content that's too much too soon? Will it show my child a steady stream of images and videos that are the opposite of noble, right, pure, lovely, admirable, excellent, or praiseworthy from Philippians 4:8? Will social media or having a smartphone prevent my child from hearing the whispers of the Holy Spirit? Will social media or smartphone degrade my child's relationship with God? Those are the 5 questions that I ask in this post that I want to be a filter for the decisions that we make. So yeah, I think we are really missing our responsibilities when it comes to this from both sides, both at home and from the church.
The boredom thing is fascinating because you mentioned it a couple times now, and it's reminding me of we had an interview with Dr. Trish Lee. She's like a double PhD neuroscientist and specializes helping guys with porn addiction through a neuroscientific lens. Really, really good work. And she said and this is true in our community as well. We surveyed them one time and asked, what are the top couple environmental conditions that you experience when you have slips or relapses, and loneliness and boredom, top of the list. We were talking about this in our conversation, and she said, my community says the same thing, but I don't believe it. I don't think anyone's actually bored. I think people are so overstimulated that they think normal amounts of stimulation is boredom. That's just, it's how inundated we are. And I kind of hear the same thing. And I think it's a really good point that most breakthrough thoughts we have, most of the richest moments you have, whether it's with another person, human to human, or with God, usually they happen in those silence and those still moments, right? And we're losing that because of technology, and we're depriving our kids of it. I think it's a really, really good point you're making.
That's right. I have an executive coach who one time he wanted to, we have Zoom calls, and he recommended that the next call happen while I go for a walk. Right? Because as you're walking, just talking on the phone, you're not staring at another person's face and analyzing what they're looking at and trying to two-dimensionally interpret what's going on. We were meant to interpret faces with our brains physically, kind of in 3 dimensions, right? When you're walking and talking, it just shakes different things loose. That's why you have epiphanies in the shower, right? That's why artists and others will talk about the inspiration that came while they were moving furniture.
Yeah.
That's, our brain needs that downtime, as you said, neurologically, in order to process who we are. And as a young person, to process your emotions and your feelings in a way where you create the internal resilience to handle these things. And that translates then into outward confidence in how you deal with people.
Yeah, and that's another big one. I'm listening to a lot of leadership material lately, and a lot of the leadership material that talks about Gen Z and the younger generations hits on kind of that confidence, the social skills. These are things that just aren't getting developed the same way because of technology. I wanted to ask you about policy. So that was, I think, the 4th layer that you had there in your 5-layer framework. One of many, you love the 5-layer framework. It's so helpful for me too, because I'm a frameworks guy, so I'm loving this.
Good.
So the policy part, you mentioned, I saw that Australia has passed a law now that basically says no social media until someone turns 16. What do you think we can learn from that experience, positively or negatively?
Well, I'd like to see more input from young people themselves, right, in talking about what this policy could look like. But I think it's the right direction. We make a lot of decisions about substances or experiences based on what we know is helpful or hurtful to young people. Talked about already, whether it's driving, whether it's alcohol, whether it's tobacco, right? We've put age limits on these things. And if, I come to a spot where I don't know where we landed on 7th graders being ready for Instagram. I don't know where we landed on 7th graders being ready for the dopamine turbocharged engine that is Snapchat, right?
Yeah.
We've got to land in a different spot. I think 16 is a place to begin. I've seen Denmark now contemplating age 18. So, right, ideas around getting clear of some of those developmental lines. So I think it's the right move. It's going to shock us into good conversation. And I think that's what it's going to do. Whether it actually becomes law or not, it is starting the right conversations that I think we need to be having to pull things out of the 1990s that are still dictating the way we see technology today.
Definitely the law that Australia passed would be very much aligned with the data and even what you've been suggesting for a long time. 16 is the age where they can start to handle it. And what do you know, how are they enforcing it? What does it look like? Because I have to imagine there's different avenues in that arena as well, as far as what it would look like to enforce it. Even the conversation about pornography usage, age verification laws are getting passed now in a lot of different states. And there's different approaches from state to state. But I guess I'm just curious, well, how would you like to see this unfold if they were going to start doing more serious legalization or policy around this stuff?
Well, I think that we have an opportunity on devices themselves as the pinch point for where some of these decisions could be made and consent could be obtained from parents, right? None of this happens without downloading an app. Where do we get the app? We get the app from the App Store. Now, can kids also go to Snapchat.com or Instagram.com and do things? Yes, they can. But we also have kids who know how to open tabs on medicine bottles, but that doesn't stop us from still putting tabs on medicine bottles. We still do the right thing. We know that kids can get fake IDs and get alcohol or other things that they want, but that doesn't stop us from still, as a good and just society, from having certain laws in place that stop 80% of the problem. What I'm
Yeah.
saying here is the App Store is the pinch point. There should be an age verification process that confirms that everybody who's downloading certain apps is a certain age. And this can be done a lot of different ways. We already, with our devices, because people with what I just said are going to be upset from a privacy perspective. I get that. But those same individuals are often the ones who look at their iPhone 100 times a day biometrically, and you've already given Apple all of that data. Your phone knows who you are. It knows how old you are with a ridiculous level of precision already. And if that device is being used by a child, it should not be able to download certain things unless a parent consents to them downloading certain things. And a parent should be, providing that consent based on good and accurate information that the App Store has given them. Right now, the App Stores are not designed to inform parents about the features of apps. They are marketing engines to get you to download the app. I have a test iPhone that's right here. People can't see it. I'm holding it up here on the screen. This is a device that has a teenager fake McKenna child on it that I use for all of my testing as part of my family sharing. The device knows based on the Apple ID age that I've given this device that this is a 16-year-old device.
Okay.
And it wouldn't even matter if I changed it to a 13-year-old device. If I were to go to the App Store, it would recommend that I download Tinder, which is a 17 plus app for dating. That is horrible.
It's
right?
crazy.
But the App Store isn't using any of the intelligence that you've already given it or data you've already given it to make these kinds of decisions. To me, that's the spot where we need to be doing more to ensure that kids have access to apps that are appropriate for them, have consent from parents who are involved in that transaction, who are informed by that transaction, who are then prompted to do certain things because of that transaction. Imagine if on your parent phone, after you've said yes to your kid downloading Snapchat, that you are then getting prompts and notifications about conversations and things that you could be having with your child about that app. These are all things that happen in other ecosystems. I'll use iPhone as an example. Sathiya, if you were to go and apply for an Apple credit card, you would find yourself in a beautiful user experience that prompts you the whole way, that notifies you the whole way, that makes it abundantly clear and ridiculously easy to apply for a credit card, get a credit card, and use that credit card as often as possible. The child exploitation issue, the digital child exploitation issue, is decades old, right? As scientist Haney Farid says, he says, why do we not have sophisticated ways to protect them? This is not a new issue.
Yeah.
Right. And so it just, when you step back for a minute and just look at where we were, where we are, and kind of this slow progression toward accepting mediocrity when it comes to protecting our kids online, when it comes to preventing them from seeing pornography, I think you just kind of go, whoa, how did we get here?
Yeah, and especially with like technology's rapid development, like it's not like it's stopped. You have AI now and AR, VR, all these advancements, to use that word, but a double-edged sword, really and truly, especially in this conversation around protecting kids and young minds. And I can't help but shake how important the family unit is in our conversation, because even as I was thinking about what you're saying, where parents can give consent, I was thinking about, even clients of ours where the families are just they're not intact. There's been a divorce or something like that. And how often a parent will just give the kid what they want when they have them for the weekend or whatever, because that time is so sacred and they don't want to be the bad parent. And what's the point if the other, 5 days of the week, they just get whatever they want at the other parent's household? And there's a lot of like complexities to this. And at the same time, I think what's true is true. The principles remain the same, and everyone can do their part, whatever that looks like, whatever stage of life it is, and whatever responsibilities you have in this world. Everybody can do their part to protect young minds, defend young eyes, as is your organization's titled, and really try to make a difference. And I always tell people, I pray that one day there's no need for my coaching practice in my business. I don't know how realistic it is, but if that did actually become a reality, it would be because we figured out how to protect the youth of our day and the youth of our generation. And that's why I love your work and I love what you're doing. For people who want to find out more about you, Chris, and what you're up to, and maybe fight the cause, or at the very least support it, what's the best way for them to do that?
Sure. So just come to protectyoungeyes.com. You'll see our website walks you through a journey. There's the very first option is start here, and it gives you 3 things that you can do. Number one, it walks you through a simple 10-question quiz that you can assess where digital risk may be in your house. Real simple, right? You kind of go through that. And the step 2 then is learning. We talk a lot about learning and community. I'm sure those are similar things that you promote in your the men that you work with when it comes to pornography. So we want parents to learn. We have different ways you can self-serve on our website. You can take an on-demand course, or you can come to one of our live presentations. And then finally, we do have a private community that we've built. We have a lot of people who follow us on social media, but this is our own space. Instagram doesn't love all the things that I say. They don't agree with all the things that we say when it comes to pushing back against places like Meta. So we built our own private community called The Table because we want parents to come together at a table to have comfortable, confident conversations. So that's what the start here does. And, for the fathers that are listening to this, I love that you are a part of the community here that's been built through this ministry. And just know that I understand a lot of what you might be wrestling with as a dad who maybe has pornography in your rear view. It could be recent or it could be far back. How do you lead your kids in this way? I was exposed to pornography as a young child that led to a compulsive use of pornography into my adult years, into marriage. And I was able to leave that behind through accountability, through Covenant Eyes, through community, through Christ in these ways. But I can tell you that it is still what I would call a near and present danger that I have to be aware of as a vulnerability. And so, dads out there, I get that part of it too. If that's something that's a current or recent struggle, and how do you interpret that as a dad trying to protect your kids in the digital age, I'm there with you. So please come to us if you have questions. You can always submit questions on our website, and I'll get those too.
That's amazing. Yes. And I highly recommend people follow you on Instagram because your content is fantastic, very informative, really thought provoking, and really, really useful. So we'll put links to all that in the show notes. Chris, thanks for what you're doing, man. I'm cheering you on, and I'm so glad I got some time with you today.
Appreciate you, brother. Thanks for this. Appreciate it.